Tonight, you won't wake in Rome or Athens, but in the shadow of a Mesopotamian ziggurat, where incense curls into the dawn and whispers of the goddess linger in every chamber. You are not a queen, not a scribe, but one of the mysterious women who served Inanna, both revered and ridiculed, sacred and scandalous. What did it mean to give your body in the name of a goddess? And why did outsiders twist the truth into something stranger than fiction? If this journey into forgotten temples stirs your curiosity, subscribe to Stone Sleeper Stories so you never miss another night among the ancients. And tell us in the comments, from which city, from which corner of the world, are you listening to this story of sacred shadows and silent prayers? Now, settle deeper into the quiet, let the night wrap around you, and step with me into Mesopotamia, where the river winds past the temple walls, and your story begins. You wake before sunrise in Uruk, the city that some call the very first of its kind. The place where the lines between heaven and earth were scratched into clay tablets and carried on the breath of scribes. The reed mat beneath your back is rough, still damp with the smell of river water and woven rushes. It creaks as you shift, your body aching from the night's stillness. Around you, the air is heavy with the fading smoke of incense, thick and resinous, clinging to your hair as though even the goddess herself wants her perfume to linger in your every breath. It is not yet light, but the city is already stirring. In the distance, you hear the first calls of the priests, voices rising in broken unison as they chant hymns to Inanna. Their tones are slow, deliberate, echoing up the walls of the great ziggurat like the hum of bees trapped in stone. Each word is ancient, carried down through centuries, as much spell as song. You have heard it so many times you could chant it in your sleep, and yet each morning it still makes your chest tighten. This is no ordinary city, and you are no ordinary woman. You sit up carefully, brushing the dust from your tunic, and let your eyes adjust to the half-light. Through the small cracks in the walls of your quarters, the first breath of dawn pushes in, a cool whisper from the Euphrates. Somewhere beyond the walls, the river carries boats of barley and clay, merchants pushing their craft through the water with long poles, their songs mixing with the croak of frogs that have not yet given way to the day. But here, in the sacred precinct of Uruk, the sound that dominates is the priests, and you know you must rise. Your life is not quite your own. It belongs, or at least it is said to belong, to the goddess. To Inanna, Lady of Love and War, Mistress of Heaven, Queen of the Morning Star. You are one of the Qadistu, a holy woman of the temple. Outsiders will one day call you something else. A prostitute, perhaps. A word they will twist and stain with their own judgments. But for now, in this moment, before the sun climbs above the horizon, you are something liminal. Something more and less than priestess, more and less than common woman. A body that is both sacred and suspect, wrapped in cloth that marks you apart, and yet unable to escape the whispers that follow wherever you walk. You push yourself to standing, stretching the stiffness from your limbs, and step outside into the open courtyard. The sky is still indigo, washed faintly with silver, where the sun threatens to rise. The ziggurat looms above you, a mountain made by human hands, its stepped sides already catching the faintest light. At the very top sits the sanctuary, where only the highest priests and the in-priestess may walk, where the bed of the goddess waits for the sacred marriage rite. You will never climb so high. Your place is below, in the courtyards, in the shadows where offerings are poured and incense smoke clings to your hair. The ground is cool beneath your feet, the clay bricks damp with night air, You move toward the water basin in the temple yard, where others like you gather in silence. One by one, you strip away the dust of sleep, dipping your hands into the cold water, splashing it on your face, your arms, your chest. There is no soap, no lather like the future will invent, only the oil of pressed olives and the sharp scent of herbs that mask the sweat of the body. You smear it across your skin, and as you do, you whisper the morning prayer, half devotion, half habit, the words spilling out softly like water over stone. Inanna, bright star, keeper of desire, protectress of women, make me fertile with coin, not with child. Make me fruitful in song, not in tears. May those who enter my presence honor you, even if they forget me. You do not know if the goddess listens. Sometimes you believe she does. In the way a sudden breeze cools your face when you are about to faint, or in the way an unexpected gift of silver lands in your hand after a long night. Other times, it feels like you are alone, speaking into stone. But you have learned that ritual is its own kind of comfort. Even if the goddess is silent, the repetition steadies you, as the chants steady the priests. When the first light breaks across the courtyard, the air begins to change. Birds stir from their nests in the temple walls, darting into the rising glow. The priests lift their voices higher, shaking bronze rattles that clink and clatter like rain against pottery. The sound echoes against the ziggurats' flanks, and the city stirs awake in answer. From beyond the walls you hear the markets opening, the bleating of goats, the cries of vendors hawking dates and onions, the sharp bark of dogs. Life surges, but here in the temple your world remains bound to ritual. You wrap your hair in a braid, pinning it with bronze clasps that dig into your scalp. The adornments are not for beauty alone. They are signs, markers, codes, to tell the city who and what you are. Some will bow in reverence when they see them. Others will spit into the dust. Both reactions have long since lost their power to sting. You belong neither fully to the sacred nor to the profane. You exist in the in-between, and the in-between has its own quiet strength. From the storage rooms, incense is brought out. Frankincense from lands far to the south, cedar resin from the mountains, herbs from the reed marshes. The smoke rises as offerings are lit, curling into the sky like fragile fingers reaching for the heavens. You watch it drift upward, and wonder, as you often do, whether the gods actually breathe it in, or whether it is only humans who are comforted by the thought that their gifts rise somewhere beyond reach. The first visitors to the temple arrive as the sun lifts itself above the horizon. Farmers with rough hands, their faces still lined with sleep. Women carrying clay jars of milk, baskets of figs. Children darting between them, their laughter out of place in the solemn courtyard. They come with offerings, with prayers, with hopes that the goddess will bless their fields, their wombs, their trade. Some glance at you quickly, then avert their eyes. They know what you are, or think they do. The whispers follow you even here. And yet, some come closer. A woman with a hollow face asks for your blessing, pressing a handful of barley into your palm. She whispers that her husband has been gone too long, that she needs her body to quicken with life, that she is afraid the goddess has forgotten her. You lay your hand upon her shoulder, murmuring words that are half prayer, half comfort. Inanna is fierce, you remind her, but she does not forget. The woman weeps softly, then leaves the grain in the offering bowl. Whether the goddess answers is beyond you. But for a moment she believed, and belief is often all there is. The sun rises fully now, spilling golden light across the baked clay of the ziggurat. Shadows shorten, the heat thickens, and your day has begun. You step back into the coolness of the shrine's inner chambers, carrying with you the smell of incense, the sting of oil on your skin, and the memory of whispered prayers. Outside, Uruk hums with life, traders haggling, animals braying, potters turning their wheels. But inside these walls, the rhythms are slower, stranger. You are both part of the city, and apart from it, bound to a goddess who is as merciful as she is cruel. And so, as dawn seeds today, you take your place at the threshold of the temple, where sacred duty and human need collide. The chants still echo, the incense still clings, and you breathe it all in, steadying yourself for what the goddess and the city will demand of you before nightfall. The sky is still pale when you rise with the other women, and walk barefoot across the cool clay tiles of the temple courtyard. The chants of the priests echo faintly in the distance, their voices carrying up the great ziggurat steps. But your path is different. You and the others move toward the water basin. A wide stone trough filled the night before with jars of river water. The surface shivers with the faintest breeze, and you dip your hands into it, letting the cold sting your skin awake. This is no ordinary washing. It is not about scrubbing away the dirt of yesterday or masking the smell of sweat. It is purification, a way of crossing from the world of dust and toil into the realm of the goddess. To stand in the precinct of Inanna requires not only your body but your breath, your very skin, to be marked as set apart. And so you begin. You splash the water across your arms, your chest, your face. It drips down, pooling at your feet. You tilt your head back and whisper a short line you've repeated. So often it feels less like prayer and more like breathing. Lady of Heaven, wash me clean of yesterday's failures. Let this water make me worthy of your gaze. Historically, Mesopotamians saw water as more than hygiene. Ablution was symbolic, not washing away dirt, but misfortune, impurity, even demons. Priests would purify themselves before entering shrines, and sometimes they even washed the statues of the gods with scented oils, as though to remind the deities themselves of their own divinity. You too mirror this act. Your skin is your altar, your body the image of service. From a low jar beside the basin, you scoop sesame oil mixed with herbs. It is thick, almost sticky, but you rub it into your skin all the same. The oil glistens on your arms, your collarbones, catching what little light filters over the walls. It is not luxury. Oil is both protection and offering. It keeps your skin from cracking in the harsh air, and it is believed to drive away spirits that bring sickness or infertility. Cedar oil, myrrh, and frankincense sometimes arrive from distant lands, gifts traded along the caravan roads, but those are for the higher priestesses, or for the statues of gods themselves. For you, sesame will suffice. Clay tablets preserve recipes for these oils, little lists of herbs and resins mixed with base oils, like the world's first cosmetics manuals. Some even specify which fragrance pleased which god. Frankincense for the sun god, cedar for Enlil, and floral scents for Inanna, who was said to breathe them as though they were her own perfume. The oil clings to your skin as you take a bronze comb and drag it through your hair. It catches, pulling at knots, and you grit your teeth as you work them free. You twist your hair into a braid, securing it with pins of bronze and reed. The style is simple, functional, yet marked. A woman's hair, in this city, speaks almost as loudly as her clothes. Shaved heads mark mourning, intricate braids mark wealth, plain pins mark service. Your hair signals what you are, a woman of the temple, neither fully free nor fully bound. Some texts suggest certain temple women, like the Naditu, shaved their heads as a mark of celibacy, living in seclusion as scribes and chantresses. Others, like the Qadistu, kept long braids, their hair an echo of Inanna herself, the goddess of both beauty and desire. Archaeologists have found pins of bone, ivory, and bronze in temple quarters. tiny markers of identity, forgotten until the soil gave them up. You smear pigment across your cheeks, red ochre ground with oil, a faint flush meant not for seduction but for vitality. Your lips you stain with crushed berries, though the color fades quickly. Around your eyes you draw a line of dark charcoal. Some say it makes you beautiful. Others say it wards off the glare of the sun and the eye infections that breed in the marshes. Perhaps it is both. Perhaps beauty and survival have never been as separate as people pretend. Like the Egyptians, Mesopotamians believed kohl could ward off evil. It wasn't simply cosmetic but protective, a barrier against spirits that crept in through the eyes. Whether you wear it for the goddess or for yourself, you never leave without it. You pause in front of a polished bronze mirror. The surface is warped, and your reflection looks strange, wider than you are, as though someone else stares back at you. You study the figure anyway. The braid, the paint, the sheen of oil. Are you preparing yourself for men, for gods, or for the gossiping eyes of the city? You do not know. Scholarly shrug historians still argue over what these rituals meant. Were women like you preparing as sacred vessels, embodying the goddess in ritual sex? Or were you more like priestesses, cleansed not for clients but for chanting, for singing hymns, for performing music? Some scholars argue that temple prostitution was largely a Greek misunderstanding, a projection of their own obsessions onto Mesopotamian rites. Others believe sexuality was indeed embedded into the cult of Inanna, though perhaps in ways stranger, more symbolic, than outsiders ever understood. You set the mirror aside and lower your head for a final prayer. The words come from memory, handed down from older women who whispered them into your ears when you first came to the temple. Inanna, star of morning, star of night, may I serve with hands steady and face bright. May those who touch me see not only me, but you. The chant settles over you like the thin film of oil on your skin. Comforting, protective, necessary. As the sun rises higher, the courtyard grows warmer. The priests' voices swell, bronze rattles clattering with each beat of their chant. You and the others return slowly from the basin, one by one, slipping back into the shaded rooms of the temple precinct. Some laugh softly, some whisper, some walk in silence. You glance at them and wonder, do they believe this ritual makes them sacred? Or do they do it simply because to refuse would invite punishment? Or worse, ridicule? You do not ask. You know the answer is different for each. You return to your chamber, your skin still slick with oil, your eyes ringed with kohl, your braid tight against your scalp. You smell faintly of sesame and smoke, and the goddess, if she is listening, will recognize you by those scents. Outside, the city is alive. Goats bleating, merchants shouting, clay ovens smoking. Inside, you are set apart. This is ritual cleansing, not vanity, not luxury, a crossing of thresholds. From sleep to waking, from ordinary to sacred, from yourself to something larger, stranger, half divine. And the day has only just begun. You step beyond the shaded courtyard, and the noise of Uruk crashes over you like the first wave of a river. The city is waking, and with it comes a soundscape as rich and chaotic as the scent of incense that still clings to your hair. Wooden stalls creak open, goats bleat, and the sharp cries of merchants cut through the hum. You walk slowly down the narrow alley that separates the temple precinct from the marketplace, and already the eyes follow you. Some look in reverence, dipping their heads slightly, as though the sight of a temple woman passing is a blessing, a sign that Inanna herself has turned her gaze their way. Others glance with open scorn, lips curling, muttering under their breath. To some, you are a vessel of the goddess, a necessary bridge between mortals and the divine. To others, you are little more than a scandal, a body rented under the excuse of ritual. You learn not to meet their eyes too long. The city air smells of onions and fish, baked bread, and human sweat. Dust rises with every footstep, coating your sandals, sticking to the sesame oil on your arms. A boy runs past you with a basket of dates, shouting at someone to make way. Two men stop speaking when you pass, turning their heads sharply as if caught whispering secrets. You know what they are thinking. You know the jokes that float in the taverns, the graffiti scratched into clay bricks, the half-smiles of men who pretend not to recognize you by day, but come to the temple by night. Historically, temple women like you occupied an uneasy space in Mesopotamian society. The Qadistu, sometimes translated as holy woman, were linked to the goddess Ishtar, Inanna. Some texts describe them as priestesses, others as sacred prostitutes, and still others suggest they were more like votaries. Women dedicated to the goddess, but not necessarily sexually active. The very ambiguity was part of the stigma. To belong to the temple was to be set apart, not wife, not mother, not market woman. Outsiders rarely knew what to make of you, so they filled the silence with rumor. Archaeologists have found graffiti scratched into temple precinct walls. Not elaborate carvings, but small marks, obscene sketches, short phrases. Some praise temple women by name, others mock them. Just as in Roman brothels, the walls of Uruk and Babylon carried whispers of desire and disdain in equal measure. You pause at a stall where a woman sells clay figurines of the goddess, tiny crude shapes, wide hips, heavy breasts, eyes exaggerated into circles. She arranges them carefully on a reed mat. A farmer's wife buys one, pressing a small measure of barley into the woman's hand. The figurine is meant to help with fertility, to coax the goddess into remembering her womb. The irony does not escape you. Women like her whisper against you in the streets, yet carry home statues that embody the same sexuality you are condemned for. Was temple prostitution real in the way later writers described it? Herodotus claimed every woman in Babylon had to sit in the temple of Ishtar and sleep with a stranger at least once in her life. Most modern historians reject this as Greek exaggeration, a misinterpretation of rituals they did not understand. Some argue that sex was symbolic, part of seasonal fertility festivals like the sacred marriage, rather than daily practice. Others hold that certain women, perhaps a minority, did perform sexual rites as offerings. The truth is likely complex, blurred, shifting between temple, city, and century. You walk further, and the stairs follow. A young girl, clutching her mother's hand, points at your braid, whispering. The mother pulls her away sharply, as if the mere act of looking too long might stain the child. And yet, later that same evening, you know some husband will slip away from this market to lay an offering at the temple steps, seeking fertility, fortune, or simply the illusion of divine intimacy. It is a contradiction you have grown used to. By day, whispers and sidelong looks. By night, offerings and prayers. You are simultaneously sacred and profane, elevated and despised. You stop at a bread stall, exchanging a polite nod with the baker. He does not offer you bread. He never does. Some merchants give discounts to temple women, believing that generosity will earn them divine favor. Others refuse to sell at all, afraid of contaminating their goods with your presence. The baker belongs to the latter kind. You are not surprised. Move on. Historically, laws reflected this ambivalence. The Code of Hammurabi lists rules for women of the temple, setting them apart legally. Some were allowed to own property, hold contracts, and live without male guardianship, freedoms rare for ordinary women. But those same laws also stripped them of rights others enjoyed. A temple woman could not marry respectably, could not return easily to household life. Once dedicated, you were marked forever, bound to an identity you could not shed. Cuneiform contracts survive, where families dedicated daughters to the temple as naditu. Some girls were given as children, sometimes to secure favor from the gods, sometimes to ease the economic burden on the family. Many of these naditu lived in cloisters, often celibate, spending their lives copying texts or managing property. Others, however, may have been pushed into ritualized sexuality, their dedication blurring into exploitation. You pull your cloak tighter as a group of young men pass. They laugh loudly, not at you exactly, but in that way that men do when they want you to know you are the joke without hearing the punchline. You keep your head high. Inside, the sting is familiar. They call you goddess, whore, priestess, slave, sometimes all in the same breath, but you have learned to let the names slide off you like oil on water. And still, you wonder, what are you really? A servant of Inanna, lifting prayers on behalf of others, a vessel for rituals outsiders misunderstand, a woman trapped in a role her family chose for her, or something else entirely, something that cannot be put into one word on a clay tablet? Scholarly shrug, the true role of temple women remains debated. Some evidence suggests they were singers, musicians, midwives, even scribes, not prostitutes at all. Others insist the sacred marriage rite, recorded in hymns, points to ritualized sex between women of the temple and men embodying gods or kings. The truth, most likely, lies in between, some celibate, some sexual, all bound to the temple in ways outsiders could never fully comprehend. You turn back toward the temple gates. The stairs follow until the heavy wooden doors close behind you, sealing out the marketplace. The noise dulls, replaced again by chants and incense. You breathe deeply, the dust still clinging to your skin. The marketplace will not forget you, nor will you forget it. You belong to both worlds, yet fully to neither. Inside, the rituals continue. Outside, the whispers spread. And you, walking the thin line between sacred and shame, prepare for the next offering, the next prayer, the next misinterpretation written down in clay. This is the marketplace, and this is the stigma that comes with it. The heavy wooden doors close behind you, and the clamor of the market softens like a dream receding at dawn. Inside the precinct walls, the air feels different, thicker, perfumed with resin, weighted by silence that is not quite silence at all. The chants of the priests echo faintly against stone, the scrape of sandals on brick, the low murmur of prayers whispered to themselves. You breathe in and feel the change as though stepping from one world into another. The city remains outside. Here, you are in the goddess's domain. The Temple of Inanna is no single chamber. It is a vast complex, a city within the city. Straight ahead looms the ziggurat, tier upon tier of sun-baked brick, rising higher than any house or palace in Uruk. Its base is broad, its summit narrow, climbing toward the heavens, like a staircase for the gods themselves. At the very top is the shrine, a room said to be furnished as a bedchamber for the goddess, where priests claim Inanna descends in spirit to meet her earthly consort during the sacred marriage rites. You will never see it, Only the priestess and the king himself ascend so high. Still, there is enough to occupy your gaze here at the base. To your left sprawls the great courtyard, where offerings are laid on reed mats and smoke from burning incense curls into the open air. Clay basins brim with oil, beer, milk, and honey, tokens left by farmers, merchants, and supplicants who hope the goddess will bless their harvest, their children, their trade. To your right stand storerooms, their sealed jars filled with grain, dates, and barley, the temple's wealth recorded on clay tablets stacked like bricks of another kind. Historically, Mesopotamian temples were not just spiritual centers but economic engines. The temple owned land, managed flocks, stored grain, employed laborers. Priests and priestesses acted as administrators, scribes, and lenders. A woman like you might appear in ritual, but behind you stood an institution as vast and complex as a kingdom. You walk slowly across the courtyard, your sandals scuffing the clay. The ground is hot now, the sun reflecting off brick walls. Statues line the sides, lions, bulls, winged figures, carved in clay and stone. Some are chipped, their faces worn, their horns dulled, but their presence still presses on you, like unseen eyes. In the corner, a boy kneels to pour water over one statue's shoulders, washing away the dust of the marketplace. Just as you washed yourself in the basin, so too are the gods washed, perfumed, and adorned. Temple rituals often treated statues as living beings. Priests fed them with bread and beer, dressed them in fine garments, and perfumed them daily. To neglect a god's statue was not just impiety, it was starvation, abandonment. The inner chambers are cooler, shadowed by thick walls. You pass down a narrow corridor where flickering oil lamps cast golden circles on plastered brick. The walls smell of soot and resin, the floor cool beneath your steps. Small side rooms open here and there, some with benches for chanting women, others with shelves of tablets. You glance at one, covered in wedge-shaped impressions. A hymn to Inanna, perhaps, or a record of grain delivered to the temple storehouses. In this place, the sacred and the mundane are pressed side by side, just as clay and reed form the city's walls. Were temple women like you mostly ritual participants, or did you also serve as administrators? Some argue that the Naditu, women cloistered in temple precincts, were primarily scribes and land managers, celibate and economically independent. Others suggest that the Qadistu, whose name is linked to holiness, embodied the goddess more directly, participating in rituals that blurred worship and sexuality. The evidence is fragmentary, and scholars still argue over which role was dominant in which city, in which century. You pause in a chamber lit by a single shaft of sunlight filtering through a high opening. Dust motes swirl in the beam like tiny spirits dancing. In the center of the room stands a low altar, its surface stained dark from centuries of offerings. On it lie dried flowers, a smear of honey, a fragment of bread. You touch the edge lightly and whisper a prayer. Not long, not elaborate, just enough to mark your passage. Further within, the temple grows stranger. The air is heavy with incense, cloying, sweet and sharp all at once. The floor is uneven, patched, where old bricks crumble. You hear chanting from deeper chambers, women's voices rising and falling in slow rhythm, the sound curling around you like smoke. You follow it until you stand before a doorway draped with woven reeds. Inside, women sway in unison, singing hymns to the goddess, their arms raised, their hair gleaming with oil. You know the songs by heart, though you do not join them now. Historically, music and song were central to temple ritual. Hymns to Inanna describe her as fierce in love, terrifying in battle, radiant in beauty. Musicians and singers performed daily, sometimes accompanying ritual sex, other times simply celebrating the goddess's presence. Clay tablets preserve their words, though often only in fragments, lines of praise, pleas for fertility, echoes of devotion. You step back, leaving them to their chant. The temple is alive, with layers, the priests counting grain in one chamber, women singing in another, supplicants laying figs in the courtyard, scribes scratching notes into clay. It is neither wholly sacred nor wholly secular, it is everything at once. Some temples functioned like banks. They stored wealth, lent silver, managed land. A woman dedicated to the temple might oversee contracts, earning influence unusual for her sex. Yet that same dedication marked her forever, branded her as temple property in the eyes of the city. You wander toward a side passage, where light barely reaches. Here, the walls are covered with small niches, each housing clay figurines of worshippers, men and women kneeling, hands clasped. They stare blankly with wide eyes, frozen in eternal prayer. Some have inscriptions, names, pleas, dedications. Others are anonymous, their prayers lost to history. You pause before one, a small woman carved with exaggerated hips, her hands pressed to her chest. She is both familiar and alien, a reflection of your own body turned into clay. Scholarly shrug, were these figurines substitutes for living bodies, left by those too poor or too distant to enter the temple? Or were they offerings meant to stand in perpetuity, praying long after their owners were gone? No one knows for certain. Archaeologists dig them up by the hundreds, mute witnesses to faiths long past. You emerge again into the open courtyard, blinking against the sudden sunlight. The ziggurat towers above, its steps shimmering with heat. You will never climb it, never touch the bedchamber of the goddess. Your place is here, below, moving among storerooms and courtyards, altars and songs. But even here, the goddess is present. In the oil on your skin, in the chants in your ears, in the eyes that follow you wherever you go. The temple is not just stone and brick. It is a living body, fed with offerings, perfumed with incense, clothed in hymns, and you, whether despised or revered, are part of its pulse. This is the temple complex, not merely walls, but a world. The temple courtyard glows in the full light of morning. The sun has climbed above the flat roofs of Uruk, flooding the sacred precinct with gold. Smoke rises in pale threads from braziers, carrying with it the smell of cedar, myrrh, and resin. The priests stand ready at the altar, their linen garments bright against the soot-streaked brick, their heads shaved smooth. Around them, clay vessels clink softly, jars uncorked, baskets opened, as if the whole city has gathered its abundance to lay before the goddess. You move with the others, your pace unhurried. In your arms a woven tray of barley bread, round and still warm from the oven. You smell its crust, earthy, slightly sweet, flecked with ash. Others carry dates, honeycombs, pitchers of milk, bowls of butter, even live doves cupped carefully in reed cages. Each gift a plea, each gift a promise. In Mesopotamia, the daily offering was not symbolic, it was the goddess's meal. Priests believed Inanna required sustenance just as mortals did. Bread, beer, meat, and sweets were placed before her statues, their fragrance coaxing the divine presence to dwell within the temple. When the ritual was done, the food was consumed by priests and attendants, not wasted, but shared in a cycle of offering and return. The high priest raises his arms. A hush falls. Words tumble from his lips in Sumerian, rhythmic and rehearsed. Lady of the evening star, bride of the morning, accept our gifts. He lifts a jar of beer, thick and dark, and pours it slowly into a clay basin. Foam gathers on the rim, spills, hisses as it strikes hot stone. The scent is sharp, yeasty, unmistakable. Behind him, another priest sprinkles ground flour into the flames, and the smoke blooms richer, mingling with cedar and honey. You set your bread on the altar among the others. The surface is crowded now: figs, onions, cucumbers, lamb fat, even garlic cloves wrapped in leaves. The goddess is feasted like a queen, though she has no body. Her statue gleams in the chamber beyond, dressed in gold, eyes inlaid with shell and lapis. To her, this food is not material but symbolic, the lifeblood of the city made manifest in taste and smell. Archaeologists have found offering lists, scratched on tablets, meticulous accounts of what gods received each day. In one record details rations of beer for Inanna the moon god, 180 liters daily, along with bread, butter, dates, and milk. The scale was staggering. To feed the gods was to feed an empire. As the ritual continues, temple musicians strike up their instruments. A lyre's strings tremble, joined by the hollow beat of a drum, the high whistle of reed pipes. Voices rise in hymn: Lady of love, queen of battle, accept our feast, dwell in our house. The sound washes over you, slow and steady, half song and half chant. It is less performance than invocation, meant not for human ears but for divine ones. Were these offerings purely symbolic acts of devotion, or did people believe the goddess literally consumed the essence of the food? Some argue that feeding statues was metaphor, a ritualized show of respect. Others insist it was taken quite literally, that the deity's spirit inhabited the image and partook invisibly of the meal. The truth may lie in between: gods fed by essence, priests fed by substance, all bound in a cycle of sacred exchange. The priests begin to lift the offerings from the altar, bread into baskets, beer into jars, fruit divided. What was the goddess's becomes theirs. You know your bread will not be wasted. It will sustain those who sing, chant, and keep watch in her name. This redistribution is part of the temple's order, part of how it feeds the poor, pays its laborers, and sustains itself as the city's beating heart. Some historians compare Mesopotamian temples to redistributive economies. Farmers brought produce to the temple, where it was offered to the gods, then stored, then rationed out again to workers and officials. The divine meal was both sacred act and economic mechanism. In the far corner of the courtyard, you notice a smaller group gathered around a different altar, this one low, adorned not with gold but with painted clay. Here the offerings are humbler: a jug of water, a handful of barley, a string of beads. The supplicants are poor, their tunics patched, their sandals cracked, yet their devotion is no less. They bow low, pressing foreheads to the ground. One whispers aloud the name of a sick child, asking Inanna for healing. Another begs for a son. A third seeks favor in trade. The goddess hears rich and poor alike. Debate persists. Did the temple prostitute, Kadistu, the holy woman, receive offerings as well? Some records suggest gifts of oil, jewelry, or even livestock were dedicated directly to women serving Inanna, perhaps recognizing their role as embodiments of the goddess in ritual. Others dismiss this, claiming those offerings supported the temple as a whole. The line between personal and institutional devotion was blurred, as it always is in matters of gods and humans. The music swells again, The priests scatter flower petals across the altar, their fragrance sharp in the hot air. Children in the crowd giggle as a dove is released, its wings flashing white against the sky. The moment feels both intimate and grand, as though the whole city breathes in unison. For a time you forget the market noise, the clamor of donkeys, the complaints of debt and hunger. For a time there is only bread and smoke, music and prayer. Slowly the ritual wanes. The priests extinguish the braziers, the crowd disperses, the courtyard empties. Offerings are carried to storerooms, notes pressed into clay tablets, hymns fading into silence. The temple exhales, returning to its ordinary rhythm. But the scent lingers: resin, beer, charred flour, an invisible reminder that the gods have eaten, and that you, by extension, are part of the divine feast. You walk back across the courtyard, lighter now without the bread in your arms. Your stomach growls faintly. Later, you may eat from the same loaves that lay on the altar, tasting what was first set before the goddess. Sacred, profane. There is little difference here. The line is thin as smoke, vanishing even as you try to see it. This is the morning offering, a meal for the gods, a redistribution for the people, a ritual that binds heaven and earth in bread, beer, and song. The courtyard empties after the morning offerings, but deeper within the temple, life continues. You step through a side passage of mud brick walls, worn smooth by centuries of hands brushing past. The air grows cooler, shadows pooling where sunlight cannot reach. Somewhere, water drips steadily into a cistern, echoing like a heartbeat. Here the sacred women dwell, the goddess do, the holy ones. Outsiders whisper of them as temple prostitutes, but the words are misleading, tangled in misunderstanding. To the people of Uruk, these women are not common harlots, but living vessels of Inanna, the goddess who is both lover and warrior, virgin and whore, destroyer and bride. You see them first in a chamber scented with cedar oil. Their garments are fine, linen dyed in rich hues, belts hung with beads of carnelian and lapis, hair oiled and coiled, kohl circling their eyes. They move with grace, unhurried. They are not many, perhaps a handful here, others in adjoining rooms. One sits with a lyre, plucking soft notes into the air. Another weaves garlands of flowers, petals staining her fingertips red. Historical note: in Mesopotamian texts, terms like Kadistu, Ishtaritu, and Entuman describe women linked to the temple. Some were priestesses of high rank. Others may have served as singers, musicians, or caretakers of the goddess's cult statue. Whether sexual rites were involved remains debated, but all bore a sacred charge to embody Inanna's paradoxical nature. You remember the hymns Inanna as the goddess who embraces the shepherd, who descends into the underworld for love, who overturns gender roles, who blesses both fertility and war. To serve her is to live at the threshold between opposites. The women here reflect that tension, neither wives nor mothers, but not outcasts either. They occupy a liminal place, both exalted and marginal. Herodotus, centuries later, would claim every Babylonian woman had to sit once in her life at the temple of Ishtar and give herself to a stranger. Many scholars now dismiss this as Greek fantasy, born of mistranslation and prejudice. Yet his tale lingers, casting a long shadow on how later ages imagined these women. You watch as one of the women steps toward a small shrine within the chamber. She pours oil over a figurine of the goddess, slender, winged, crowned with horns of the crescent moon. She sings under her breath, her voice low and honeyed. Lady of love, lady of desire, receive this gift. The words are less for human ears than for divine. Debate persists among scholars. Did sacred sexual rites occur here, echoing Inanna's mythic sacred marriage with the shepherd god Dumuzi. Some argue the high priestess and king enacted this union each new year, ensuring fertility for the land. Others believe the ritual was symbolic only, a drama, spoken, not performed in flesh. The truth remains uncertain, hidden in fragments of clay and myth. Yet even if the sacred marriage was rare, sexuality infused Inanna's worship. She was the goddess who declared, "Who will plow my vulva? Who will water my field?" Words etched in love poetry older than most nations. The women here channeled that energy, not as wives or concubines, but as figures of devotion. Their beauty, their songs, their presence itself were offerings. Cylinder seals show images of couples embracing, sometimes beneath Inanna's star or flanked by temple symbols. Whether these scenes depict ritual acts, myths, or simply human desire sanctified by divine witness is debated. But the imagery suggests sexuality and piety were not as sharply divided as in later religions. You linger by the doorway, hesitant. One of the women notices and meets your gaze. Her expression is unreadable, neither invitation nor dismissal, only a calm acknowledgement, as though to remind you she is not here for you, she is here for the goddess. Another woman rises, taking up a tambourine. She begins to beat it softly, hips swaying, voice rising in a hymn that is half song, half incantation. The others join in, weaving melody and rhythm, voices curling upward like smoke. For a moment, the chamber is transformed, walls dissolve, the goddess is present, shimmering unseen, her desire a heat in the air. This is not debauchery, it is ritual. The women are not commodities, but conduits. Through them, Inanna tastes the world of mortals, and mortals taste the breath of the goddess. Yet outside these walls, gossip thrives. Traders in the market mutter crude jokes. Foreign scribes twist words into scandal. Even today, scholars cannot agree. Were these women prostitutes, priestesses, entertainers, healers, or all of these at once? Perhaps the categories themselves are wrong. Inanna herself never fit neatly into a single role. You leave the chamber quietly, sandal soles whispering against the floor. Behind you, the women's voices linger, rising and falling like a tide. They are not yours to understand fully. They belong to the goddess, to history, to myth. And as you step back into the corridor, you realize this temple is not just brick and altar. It is body and song, devotion and desire woven together, impossible to untangle. This is the world of the sacred courtesans, part history, part rumor, wholly inseparable from the goddess who reigned as queen of heaven and earth. The morning chants fade, replaced by the earthy clatter of pots and the fragrance of roasted grain. You step into the temple's inner courtyard where the sacred meal is being prepared. Stone hearths glow with embers. Attendants stir heavy bronze cauldrons, steam curling into the air and catching the first light that spills over the ziggurats' steps. The meal is not a feast for mortals alone, it is for the gods. Every dish cooked here is set first before the statue of Inanna, before the silent stone figures of Dumuzi and Nanna. The gods are offered the best, fine beer, fresh dates, milk still warm from the goat, bread dense with sesame seed. Only after the goddess has been fed may the people partake. You kneel near the hearth and watch barley ground into flour by hand. Two women lean over the grinding stones, shoulders straining, their voices keeping time and rhythm. The flour is mixed with water, kneaded into thick loaves, and baked against hot clay. The smell is simple, ancient, comforting. Historical note: temples across Mesopotamia functioned as kitchens and storehouses, as much as shrines. Records on clay tablets list barley, beer, sheep, onions, dates, figs, and honey among offerings. Meals fed not only the gods symbolically, but also the priests, singers, guards, and temple women who served. The temple was, in a sense, the city's beating stomach. Beside the bread, great jars of beer ferment, froth rises and falls as bubbles churn through the thick liquid. This beer is no golden ale, but a porridge drink, cloudy, bitter, drunk through reed straws to filter out husks. When you sip, it fills your belly fast, both nourishment and intoxication. A hymn to Ninkasi, goddess of brewing, survives from around 1800 BCE. It reads like a recipe, praising the goddess while instructing brewers in the art of fermentation. It shows how drink was never just sustenance. It was ritual, poetry, and divine communication in liquid form. Around you, platters of lamb are carried in, glistening with fat. Sheep were the temple's lifeblood, herded on its fields, sheared for wool, sacrificed for meat. Their cries echo faintly in the pens outside, reminders that devotion is often paid in blood. Priests carve portions with care, setting aside the choicest cuts for the goddess, while the rest are shared among the temple staff. You glance at the sacred women, the Kadistu, as they sit together in a low alcove. They do not eat immediately. First, they place morsels on a small tray, lifting it toward the goddess's statue. They murmur blessings before tasting anything themselves. Their fingers are stained with saffron, their lips brushed with date syrup, a sweet contrast to the salty lamb. Some argue these meals reflected a divine human covenant. The people fed the gods in return for protection and fertility. Others see them as redistribution of wealth. The temple controlled vast land and herds. Meals offered a way to spread resources, reinforcing loyalty and dependence. Perhaps both are true. In Mesopotamia, politics and religion rarely separated cleanly. The air thickens with scent onions sizzling in fat, garlic crushed with stone, coriander seeds pounded and sprinkled into pots. Food is medicine here too. A pinch of cumin for digestion, fenugreek for health, mint for freshness. The temple kitchen doubles as apothecary, its recipes recorded on clay tablets alongside incantations. The world's oldest known cookbook comes from Mesopotamia, clay tablets from Babylon, dated around 1700 BCE. They describe stews seasoned with leeks, onions, coriander, garlic, and herbs. These are not mere lists of ingredients, but records of a culture that saw cooking as both science and magic. Children of the temple workers run through the courtyard, laughing, clutching chunks of bread still warm from the oven. Their mothers scold half-heartedly, smiling, for even here in sacred space, life insists on being ordinary, playful. The gods perhaps approve. Inanna herself was never humorless. Later, the meal is carried in procession. Platters are raised high, lyres are plucked in solemn rhythm, drums roll like distant thunder. The food is placed before Inanna's image. For a time, the hall is silent. The goddess is believed to eat not with mouth, but with essence. Smoke, steam, and scent rise upward, pleasing her as prayers do. Only then may the priests, courtesans, and attendants share what remains. You sit on a reed mat among them. A bowl of lentil stew is pressed into your hands, thick, hearty, flavored with herbs that bite the tongue. You eat slowly, aware this is no ordinary meal. Every taste is layered with meaning, survival, devotion, community. Archaeologists have found temple storerooms with huge jars of grain, wine, and oil. These spaces were not only for rituals, but also for redistribution in times of famine. The temple kitchen, in this way, was an early welfare system, binding rich and poor to the gods, generosity. You notice one woman breaking her bread carefully, setting aside a portion to be buried later in the earth outside the shrine. This act, she tells you softly, feeds the ancestors, who linger beneath the soil. Food is not just for gods or mortals, but for the unseen as well. By the end of the meal, the courtyard hums with warmth. People lean back on mats, bellies full, voices low. Smoke curls into the sky, carrying prayers upward. For a moment, hunger does not exist. Everyone is joined, priest and child, sacred courtesan and cook, the goddess herself. And as you taste the last sip of beer, thick and earthy, you realize in this place, eating is not separate from worship. To nourish the body is to nourish the divine. The meal's warmth lingers in your stomach, heavy and comforting. As the last bowls are cleared away, the courtyard quiets. Then comes the first note, soft, deliberate, drawn from the strings of a lyre. It vibrates through the temple like a breath, pulling every ear toward its source. You sit up, drawn closer to the sound. Musicians gather near the statue of Inanna. They hold lyres with curved wooden arms and shining strings, some strung with gut, others with twisted hair. The instruments are inlaid with lapis lazuli, shells, and gold leaf, shimmering like dawn against the dim stone walls. The first melody is slow, prayerful. Voices follow, layered like woven reeds. Deep male chants, high female tones rising above, their syllables echoing the hymns carved into clay tablets. They sing of Inanna's descent into the underworld, her return in triumph, her power over love, battle, and fertility. Historical note from royal tombs in archaeologists have uncovered lyres more than 4,000 years old, buried with gold and silver ornamentation. These bull-headed lyres suggest music was not entertainment alone but sacred technology, bridging mortal and divine. The bull's head, symbol of virility and power, linked sound with life force itself. Drums join in, tight skins stretched over hollow frames, beaten with hands in rhythms both simple and complex. Their thuds reverberate in your chest, a second heartbeat. Flutes carved from reed pipes weave high, airy notes between the strings. The temple becomes a living instrument, every wall and body resonating. You glance at the sacred women. They rise and move in slow arcs, arms tracing circles in the air. Their steps keep time with the drums, their voices bending to the melody. This is no performance for an audience. It is an offering. Music here is not for applause. It is a gift of sound to Inanna, and she alone is the honored listener. Some historians argue temple music functioned as coded liturgy, its rhythms marking sacred calendars or astronomical cycles. Others believe it was ecstatic, designed to induce altered states in both participants and priests. Clay tablets record hymns but rarely describe how they were performed. The truth may be both structure and trance interwoven, discipline and ecstasy side by side. The tempo rises, lyres pluck faster, drums tighten, voices soar. You feel it in your blood, stirring restlessness, almost a frenzy. For a moment, it seems the goddess herself is descending into the hall. Candles flicker, shadows leap high on the walls. Musicians close their eyes, lost in their offering. A hymn to Inanna describes her as the one who dances on battlefields, whose hips shake the mountains. Music was thought to mirror her movements, to embody her presence. When singers trembled their voices or dancers shook their hips, it was more than art. It was divine imitation. Between songs, silence falls, but it is not empty silence. The hush is electric, filled with the residue of sound, like incense lingering after smoke. People breathe slowly, reverently. In that quiet, you sense the temple's purpose to draw human bodies into harmony with cosmic rhythms, to make life itself musical. Children hum along, echoing snatches of melody. Elders sway, their eyes half closed. Even the guards, spears in hand, tap their feet against the stone floor, caught in the pull of sound. There is no boundary. Everyone becomes musician, every heart a drum. Mesopotamian music influenced cultures far beyond. Clay tablets record not only lyrics but also the earliest known music notation, diagrams of string intervals, scales, and tuning systems. This makes Mesopotamia the birthplace of recorded music theory. In these temple courts, sound was both sacred and scientific, ritual and record. You close your eyes. The music carries you elsewhere, to dream fields, to riverbanks where reeds sway, to the gates of heaven where Inanna herself reclines. The melody softens into lullaby, a gentle drift that blurs time. You could almost fall asleep here on the reed mat, as many likely did, the goddess's voice wrapping them in sound. At the peak of the ritual, one woman steps forward holding small bronze cymbals. She strikes them together with a sharp, bright ring. The sound cuts through the hall like sunlight breaking storm clouds. The congregation gasps, then exhales in unison. It is said this moment awakens the goddess, calling her attention fully into the temple. Excavations show miniature instruments buried with children, suggesting even the young were initiated into temple soundscapes. Some scholars think these were toys, others sacred tools. Either way, it shows music was woven into life from its very beginning. As the ritual ends, the musicians lower their instruments. Silence returns once more, but this time it feels whole, like a completed circle. The air tastes different, sweeter, as though sound itself has fed you. You lean back against the cool stone and realize this court of music is as vital to the temple as bread and beer. It nourishes not the belly but the spirit. Through rhythm and song, mortals touch the eternal. The music fades. The last note of the lyre lingers in the stone like dew before sunrise. Slowly, people disperse into side corridors, each carrying the hush of the ritual as if they are afraid to break it. A priest gestures to you. His eyes are calm, but his hand is firm. You follow him into a narrower passage, torches burning low along the wall. The air cools as you walk, thick with incense and something else. Sweat, perhaps, or anticipation. Ahead, a curtain of woven reed and wool parts. Inside lies a chamber small and dim, lit only by a single oil lamp flickering on an altar. A carved idol of Inanna stands above it, her eyes wide, lips parted as though she herself is about to speak. This is the sacred chamber, the place most worshippers never see. You kneel, not from command, but instinct. The walls are painted with faded pigments, spirals, flowers, stars. On the ground are cushions and reed mats, laid in a circle. A brazier smolders with cedar and myrrh, the smoke spiraling upward, like prayers you cannot voice. Archaeologists debate whether sacred chambers like these were real places for intimacy, or whether they existed more in ritual imagination. Some temple layouts in Uruk and Ur contain small inner sanctuaries behind courtyards, architectural hearts of the ziggurat. Whether sexual acts occurred, there is a question no excavation can prove. The priest leaves. In his place enters a woman. Her hair is oiled and braided, dark eyes rimmed with kohl. She wears a sheer linen robe, light against the lamplight, and strings of beads that clink softly as she moves. She does not bow. She is not servant here. She is embodiment, a vessel of Inanna. You notice her calm. There is no rush, no shame. She circles slowly, scattering petals of pomegranate and date blossoms onto the floor. Her hands move deliberately, tracing symbols into the air. When she finally sits, it is not beside you, but before you, like a teacher before a student, or perhaps like a goddess before her supplicant. In Mesopotamian texts, women connected to temples are called naditu, goddesstu, or entu. Some served in economic roles, some in ritual singing, some possibly in sacred intimacy. Later Greek and biblical authors claimed Mesopotamian temples practiced ritual prostitution, but modern scholars debate this fiercely. Some argue it was slander, others believe it was real but rare. The woman begins a chant, low and steady. Her voice is less song than vibration, humming deep into your chest. You feel it travel through the floor, up your spine, into your skull. It is not meant for your ears alone. It is for the goddess listening through you. When she touches your hand, it is not seduction, but initiation. Her palm is cool, her fingers strong. She traces a circle on your skin, then rests her hand over your heart. This body, the gesture seems to say, is a temple too. Historical note: a hymn to Inanna describes her as both virgin and harlot, queen and servant, fierce in battle and tender in love. She embodies contradictions, collapsing boundaries. The sacred chamber may have been a place to enact these paradoxes, where intimacy was not about pleasure, but about mirroring divine duality. The act itself, if there is one, is quiet, reverent. No laughter, no lustful frenzy. Instead, it feels like liturgy, touch, in rhythm with breath, breath in rhythm with prayer. The body becomes another instrument, like the lyre or the drum. Its sounds and movements offered upward, not inward. Was this sacred sex literal? Some scholars argue that kings performed ritual unions with priestesses during New Year festivals to secure fertility for the land. Others suggest texts describing such acts are metaphorical, poetic imagery of sowing and harvest, not flesh and skin. The line between symbol and action remains blurred, and perhaps deliberately so. You lie back against the cushions, the lamp's flame flickering above you. The woman continues her chant, her movements slow and deliberate, her eyes half closed as though she sees another world. For a moment you forget the chamber, the city, even your own body. You feel only rhythm, of heart, of breath, of ritual. Later writers, especially Herodotus, described Babylonian women compelled to lie with strangers as temple prostitutes. Yet no Mesopotamian source confirms such compulsion. Instead, texts often praised temple women for their wisdom, wealth, and status. The Greek tales may have been exaggerations, cultural misunderstandings, or deliberate scandal aimed at enemies. The ritual ends not with climax, but with stillness. The woman presses her forehead to yours, then rises. She sprinkles water from a clay bowl onto the floor, extinguishing the brazier. Smoke fills the chamber one last time. Without a word, she leaves. You remain alone in the dim silence. The cushions are still warm, the air still heavy with incense. Somewhere above, chants resume in the main hall, muffled through walls of stone. You realize the sacred chamber is not about secrecy, nor even about sex. It is about entering a space where human and divine dissolve into one. And as you stand, legs unsteady, you sense the paradox: you have touched another body, yet it feels as though you touched the goddess herself. You are led out of the chamber slowly, your eyes still adjusting to the shifting light. The main sanctuary glows faintly from torches, but you do not return to its crowded sound. Instead, you are guided through a side corridor that grows narrower, darker, until at last it opens into a small antechamber. The air here feels softer, lighter, almost fragile. A reed curtain muffles sound from outside, and the scent of frankincense is replaced by something gentler, perhaps rose water or honey. Cushions are scattered on the floor, not in ceremonial patterns, but casually, as if this is a space where formality dissolves. A woman enters, not adorned like a priestess of ritual union, nor as regal as the intu you saw in the public procession. Her hair is bound with a simple cord, her robe unembroidered, her feet bare. She kneels across from you, eyes steady, hands folded in her lap. Her presence radiates neither seduction nor command, but listening. Here, words matter more than touch. You lean forward. She nods once, as though to open an invisible door. And so you begin, not with eloquence, but with fragments. Fears of illness, doubts of faith, the weight of guilt for something unsaid. Your words tumble out unevenly, fragile like cracked pottery. She does not interrupt. In Mesopotamia, temples were not only houses of ritual, but also repositories of counsel and mediation. Temple women, especially Qadistu and Naditu, may have served as trusted confidants for individuals who sought divine intercession. Some texts suggest they recorded petitions, prayers, or omens for supplicants. Her listening is not passive. As you speak, she hums low, almost inaudible, a sound that steadies your breath. Occasionally, she traces symbols in the air, a star, a crescent, a wave. Each seems to anchor your words in something larger, pulling them into the current of ritual meaning. Clay tablets from Mari and record personal prayers and laments, some astonishingly intimate pleas for fertility, confessions of betrayal, despair at loss. While most were addressed to the gods, many may have been mediated by temple figures like this woman, human ears to catch the words before passing them into divine silence. When you falter, she lifts a small jar and dips her fingers into oil perfumed with juniper. She brushes it lightly across your brow, then your lips, as if sealing your words into the air. The touch is neither sensual nor clinical. It is ceremonial. You realize confession here is not about judgment. There are no accusations, no punishments. It is about unburdening. The goddess, through this woman, absorbs what you can no longer carry. Some argue that Mesopotamian temples offered a kind of proto-confession, not unlike later religious practices, where individuals unburden sins before a mediator. Others see these rituals less as moral cleansing and more as transactional, petitioning the gods for healing or prosperity. Both interpretations may hold truth, depending on time and temple. She asks nothing of you, no penance, no vow. Instead, she offers you a cup of water, sweetened with date syrup. You drink. The liquid is simple, earthy, grounding. And as it passes down your throat, you feel lighter, as though each sip washes away a layer of dust from your chest. Some temple records mention sacred women as keepers of lamentations. They were trained singers of grief, their voices considered medicine for the soul. To speak sorrow to them was to let it be transformed into song, a sound pleasing to the gods. The woman tilts her head as if listening beyond you now. Perhaps she hears your words rising to Inanna, or perhaps she listens to the silence you have left behind. Her expression does not change, but her presence tells you something important. You are heard. She presses a small clay token into your palm, inscribed with a starburst. "Leave it at the altar," she whispers. Her voice is the first sound she has spoken, and it carries weight. This is not a charm, but a marker, a symbol that your burden has changed hands. You stand, reluctant to break the fragile stillness. She bows, not deeply, but enough to acknowledge that something has passed between you that cannot be spoken again. Then she draws the reed curtain aside, gesturing you back toward the temple corridors. The transition is jarring. Noise from the outer sanctuaries floods in chants, footsteps, clinking vessels. The moment of intimacy vanishes, swallowed by stone and ceremony. Yet in your chest, something has shifted. You are lighter, you are freer. Scholars still argue whether such confessional exchanges were formalized or informal, but evidence suggests that temples acted as both courts of law and places of psychological release. People confessed thefts, betrayals, and debts not only to legal authorities but also to temple mediators who offered spiritual reassurance. As you leave, you glance back. The woman remains kneeling in the chamber, her silhouette soft in lamplight. She does not follow. Her role was not to hold you but to release you. And so you walk back into the layered rituals of the ziggurat, carrying nothing but a small clay token, and the feeling that for once, you are not alone in your silence. The corridor widens, and the fragrance changes again. Gone are the oils of confession. Now your nose fills with roasted grains, seared meat, the sharp sweetness of dates caramelizing in honey. You step into a large courtyard, flanked by colonnades. Torches and braziers throw light across clay tables stacked with bread loaves, baskets of figs, jars of beer foaming at the rim. The feast has begun. You are ushered to sit among others, farmers with rough hands, merchants draped in fine wool, soldiers still dusted with the road. All are equals here, at least for this moment. The tables are low, the cushions simple, but the abundance is startling. It is no private banquet. This is the people's offering to the goddess, transformed into nourishment for all. A priest raises his arms, chanting the familiar invocation to Inanna, Queen of Heaven, who receives the fat and grain of the earth. The words echo, half blessing, half reminder that every morsel here was first meant for her. Archaeological digs at Uruk and Nippur have uncovered vast temple storehouses of grain, beer, and oil. Offerings from citizens, whether as taxes, tithes, or devotion, were collected and redistributed through ritual feasts. This practice blurred the line between worship and welfare, ensuring the community both honored the gods and fed its hungry. Your bowl is filled with barley stew. You dip bread into it, the crust soaking up the thick, earthy broth. The taste is simple, yet satisfying. You glance around and see smiles, mouths full, hands sticky with honeyed fruit, shoulders leaning together in momentary ease. Cuneiform texts describe how Mesopotamian temples could brew thousands of liters of beer each year. Beer was not only a staple drink, but a sacred substance. To drink at a temple feast was to participate in divine sustenance. Some hymns even imagined the gods themselves drinking the froth. The temple women move among the crowd, ensuring bowls are filled, cups topped, hands washed in basins of scented water. They are not distant, untouchable figures in this setting. They are servants of the feast, embodiments of Inanna's generosity. Their smiles are part of the ritual. One pauses near you, laying her hand briefly on your shoulder as she sets down another plate. The gesture is light, but in it you sense blessing. Her presence sanctifies the food, turning bread into communion. Some historians argue that temple prostitutes, if the term even applies, were not primarily engaged in sexual acts, but in maintaining the sacred hospitality of the temple. Food, drink, touch, and care may have been as central to their role as ritual intercourse. This challenges the popular but reductive image of sacred harlots. The courtyard hums with laughter now. A singer begins plucking a lyre, his voice weaving old tales of Gilgamesh into the rhythm of clinking cups. Children dart between tables, sneaking figs, their giggles rising above the chant. For a moment, the temple feels less like a place of awe, and more like a hearth, large enough to hold the entire city. You chew slowly, watching the flicker of firelight against clay walls. It strikes you that the goddess is present not only in the rituals of passion and confession, but also in these ordinary moments of warmth and fullness. Inanna, after all, was goddess of fertility and abundance. What better way to honor her than to share food, until bellies were round and hearts loosened? Excavations at uncovered massive kitchens attached to temples, complete with clay ovens, bronze cauldrons, and drains. These facilities suggest large-scale food preparation, far beyond the needs of priests alone. Temple feasts may have fed hundreds at once. The singer's song shifts into a slower melody, a hymn recognizable to all. Voices join in, rising unevenly but with fervor. You find yourself singing, too, the words spilling from you as easily as the stew you swallow. The hymn is no polished choir. It is rough, human, and deeply communal. The woman beside you leans closer, her breath smells of beer, her eyes of warmth. She whispers, "Tonight, you are Inanna's guest." It is not a metaphor but a truth. In this feast, the goddess sits invisible among you, eating through your mouths, drinking through your throats, laughing through your voices. Scholars emphasize that Mesopotamian religion was not about private piety, but communal participation. Worship meant festivals, shared meals, collective song. The line between sacred and social blurred completely in such spaces. When the last bowls are emptied, priests carry platters of the choicest meats into the sanctuary. These are not eaten by the crowd, but placed before the idol of the goddess. Smoke rises, curling into the night sky. The smell of roasting fat mingles with incense, a signal to heaven that Inanna has been fed as well. The crowd quiets, eyes drawn toward the altar. For a moment, silence hangs heavy. Then, as if on cue, cups are raised again, laughter bursts forth, and the feast resumes. The goddess has eaten. Now her people may indulge. You lean back on the cushions, full to the edge of drowsiness. The warmth of the food, the thrum of song, the hum of voices, together they soften you, pulling you toward a half-dream state. The temple around you feels like the belly of a great beast, digesting grief, hunger, and longing into joy. Some texts describe festivals lasting days, with offerings continuing until storehouses were emptied. These prolonged feasts functioned as both religious devotion and political spectacle, demonstrating the temple's wealth and its ability to sustain the populace. You close your eyes. The lyre plays on, laughter rings, hands press bread into hands. You realize that in Mesopotamia, devotion was not only whispered in prayers or acted in rituals of intimacy. It was chewed, swallowed, and digested. made flesh in the simplest act of eating together. And so, as you sink into the soft haze of the feast, you know the goddess does not only live in the high towers of the ziggurat. She lives here, in every mouthful of bread, every drop of beer, every shared glance, across a crowded table. The light fades, and the shadows of the ziggurat stretch long across the city. Uruk exhales as day's heat bleeds away. The sounds of the feast drift into the distance, still laughter, still lyre strings, but softer now, like an echo from another world. You step into the outer courtyard, the stone cool under your feet, the torches hissing as they catch the rising night wind. The sky is violet, streaked with fire, and one by one the stars prick awake. At the base of the great stairway, braziers are lit in sequence, each flame answering the one before it until the whole ziggurat glows with fire. The sight is staggering. The temple is no longer a building but a mountain of light. Archaeologists note that ziggurats were not hollow temples, but massive platforms of mud brick, with shrines perched atop. Yet inscriptions describe them glowing with fires and lamps, their flames visible for miles across the plains, a beacon of divine presence. The priests chant again, their voices resonating against the clay walls. Each intonation is meant to summon the goddess inward, down from the heavens, into her sanctuary for the night. The city watches silently. This is no casual ritual. Without Inanna's favor, the fields might wither, the rivers might fail. You join the gathering line that circles the stair. Torches pass from hand to hand, sparks falling into the dust. Together you ascend, step by careful step. The air grows thinner, cooler. The bustle of the city drops away until all you hear is your own breathing and the murmur of hymns. At the summit you find a hush. The shrine glimmers, walls of polished stone, doors inlaid with precious metals, incense curling in fragrant ribbons. Temple women move like shadows within, adjusting lamps, smoothing linens, preparing for the goddess as if for a royal guest. One gestures for you to kneel. You lower yourself onto woven mats, feeling the cool night air kiss your skin. Around you, others bow, some whispering prayers, some silent. Was this moment, nightfall at the shrine, the time when sacred sexual rites occurred? Some classical writers claim so, but most modern scholars argue it was likely symbolic or ceremonial rather than physical. The evidence is thin, and the truth lies somewhere between myth and ritual. You close your eyes, and the chanting carries you further. The words are old, older than the city itself, invoking the goddess as morning star and evening star, as queen of love and queen of battle, as fertility itself, and as inevitable death. It is overwhelming, one being holding all opposites. Beside you, a woman begins to sing softly. Her voice is clear, like water poured into bronze. She does not sing for the crowd, but for the goddess alone. Yet in listening, you feel as if it is meant for you too. Her song settles into your bones, weaving itself into your breath. Hymns to Inanna often survive on clay tablets. Many are explicitly erotic, describing her as the lover of Dumuzi, or as the one who makes the king's lap rejoice. But others are lullabies of protection, sung at night to keep evil spirits away. The temple's soundscape at dusk was as varied as it was sacred. The torches flicker lower, the incense thickens, the air cools. A sense of waiting fills the space, waiting for the goddess to arrive, waiting for dreams to unfold, waiting for the night itself to give birth to mystery. The temple women draw close, carrying bowls of scented oil, They move among the kneeling crowd, anointing foreheads, rubbing shoulders, offering touches of blessing. The oil smells of cedar and myrrh, grounding and sharp. Their hands are both practical and tender, a human bridge to divine presence. You feel the slickness on your brow, the press of a thumb, the warmth of flesh against flesh. It is not seduction, it is sanctification. In Mesopotamian religion, touch was central. Clay tablets describe priests laying hands to transfer blessing or brushing garments as a sign of ritual purity. What later cultures might label as erotic, Mesopotamians often considered sacred exchange of power. The hymn fades. The torches are dimmed until only the stars shine above and the lamps flicker within. The great stairway below is dark now, the city hushed. You realize you are perched between earth and sky, suspended on this platform of light and shadow. The priest raises his staff one last time, and the crowd disperses slowly, reverently. Some descend back into the sleeping city. Others remain, curling on mats in the temple courts, to sleep in the goddess's presence. You linger. You watch the lamps gutter. You listen to the night wind, threading through the reed roofs. You feel the goddess not as an idol or a myth, but as a presence alive, in the silence, in the stars, in the steady rhythm of your own pulse. Some scholars believe that sleeping within temple grounds was a form of dream incubation, seeking visions, guidance, or healing through dreams thought to be sent by the goddess. This practice later influenced Greek incubation rituals in Asclepius temples. You lie down on a woven mat, the cool fibers against your cheek, the sky vast above you. The feast is digested, the songs fade, the chants dissolve into memory. All that remains is night. You close your eyes, and with the ziggurat breathing softly around you, you let yourself be carried into the dreams of Inanna. Uruk does not truly sleep. The sun may be gone, but the city exhales differently at night. You descend from the ziggurat, torch in hand, and the streets reveal a second life, quieter, dimmer, yet restless. Dogs bark in the distance, their calls carried by the cool breeze off the Euphrates. The smell of ash lingers from cooking fires. Merchants pack away their wares under reed canopies, but others still whisper in corners, trading in goods better sold by night. Rare stones, imported oils, sometimes secrets themselves. A night watchman passes, his staff tapping rhythmically on the paving stones. His presence is both warning and comfort. Thieves and spirits alike are said to roam these hours. Mesopotamian cities had organized night watches. Cuneiform tablets list rosters of guards assigned to different gates and quarters of Uruk. Their duties included keeping order, deterring theft, and reporting omens such as fires or unnatural noises. Night was not lawless, but it was fragile. You pass a small courtyard where a family sleeps outdoors. The father lies flat on a mat, the mother curled beside him, children sprawled in disarray. Above them, mosquito nets hang like veils, glowing faintly in torchlight. Night in Mesopotamia was often spent in the open air, the heat of mud brick walls unbearable after a long day. From nearby alleys comes the sound of reed pipes and soft drums. It is not festival music now, but something more intimate. A handful of neighbors gather under an awning, sharing wine from a clay jug, singing songs too casual for the temple. They beckon you closer, and for a moment you stand among them, tasting the sour sweetness of fermented dates on your tongue. Archaeological finds in Mesopotamia reveal musical instruments ranging from harps and lyres to drums and rattles. Music was woven into every level of life: royal courts, temple hymns, and neighborhood gatherings. Clay tablets even record tuning instructions, making Mesopotamia one of the first cultures to write down music theory. A woman laughs, sharp, sudden, joyful. Her bracelets clink against a clay cup. She leans close to her companion, whispering something that makes him blush even in the dim glow. Was she a temple worker returning home? Was she simply a neighbor? The line between sacred and ordinary, between ritual and leisure, blurs in this city, where the goddess of love reigns. At the city gates you glimpse another kind of bustle. Caravans sometimes arrive at night to avoid the heat of day. Donkeys bray, traders haggle in half-muttered tones, guards measure, and record goods by torchlight. Frankincense from Arabia, copper from Oman, lapis lazuli from Afghanistan. All these treasures pass through Uruk under starlight. Mesopotamia's trade routes connected vast territories, and much of this commerce operated under temple authority. The goddess's house was also the city's bank and warehouse. To sleep near the ziggurat was not only religious, it was economical, practical, strategic. You follow the sound of water and find men hauling buckets from the city's wells, their shoulders glistening in moonlight. Water is life here, and even at night it must be drawn, carried, stored. A boy runs past with a clay jar bigger than his torso, laughing as though the weight were nothing. Above all this, the ziggurat still glows faintly, a triangle of fire against the stars. Its presence is a reminder even at night the goddess sees. Even in shadow, her eyes are upon the city. You settle by a low wall, letting your torch burn low. The city breathes around you. Watchmen's calls, children's giggles, donkey hooves, distant songs. It is not silence, but it is not chaos either. It is the heartbeat of Uruk, steady and ancient. Clay tablets sometimes describe Uruk as the city of the sleepless. This may have been more than poetic exaggeration. With constant trade, temple duties, watch rotations, and ritual practices, the city truly pulsed around the clock. Night was another kind of day. The stars wheel slowly overhead, and your eyelids grow heavy, but Uruk does not sleep. The city keeps moving, humming, alive. And within it, you are both participant and witness, another dreamer under the watch of Inanna. You return toward the ziggurat, its terraces looming darker now against the night. The torches along its stairways have burned low, but enough remain to guide you upward, each flame flickering in the wind like a nervous heartbeat. The higher you climb, the quieter the city below becomes, until the hum of Uruk fades into a hush. At the summit, the temple doors creak open just enough to admit you. Inside, shadows cling to the stone walls. The great outer chamber is familiar: altar, incense stands, woven rugs. But tonight your path turns toward a side corridor, narrower, older, less trodden. The air here smells of dust and resin. You hear only the sound of your sandals brushing against the floor, the soft echo reminding you that these halls were not built for crowds. They were meant for the chosen few: priests, priestesses, and those invited into mysteries not spoken aloud. Ancient texts, such as Herodotus's controversial accounts, claim that Mesopotamian temples housed sacred chambers where ritual intercourse occurred. Scholars debate whether this reflects actual practice or outsider misinterpretation. What is certain is that ziggurats contained restricted inner rooms, reserved for high rites and the presence of the gods. You pause at a doorway marked by faint carvings. The light of your torch reveals a lion's head scratched into plaster, its mane curling like flames. Beyond lies a chamber small and dim, lit by a single oil lamp. On the floor reed mats, a bronze vessel half filled with scented oil and a bowl of pomegranates, their skins dark and glistening. Were these offerings, or were they tools for something more intimate? Inanna's symbols included the lion, the pomegranate, and the date palm. Pomegranates in particular often appear in ritual contexts across the Near East, tied to fertility and rebirth. Their presence in a secluded chamber suggests more than casual snacking. You kneel, setting your torch in a bracket, and run your fingers along the mat. Worn, smooth, familiar with the weight of countless bodies. Did women once recline here in the name of the goddess? Did supplicants lay themselves down hoping to taste something divine in the act of human union? Or is it you who is projecting such meanings onto shadows and silence? Some scholars argue that sacred prostitution in Mesopotamia may have been more symbolic than physical, rituals of marriage between a priestess and a king representing the union of Inanna and Dumuzi. Others contend that travelers, particularly Greeks, exaggerated or misunderstood temple practices, turning metaphor into scandal. Your thoughts drift as you gaze into the lamp's flame. In it you see women draped in linen, their kohl-lined eyes downcast, their hands pouring oil onto worshippers' skin. You imagine priests chanting, drummers beating slow rhythms, incense rising so thick it hides all but the shapes of bodies. Was it sacred ecstasy? Was it performance? Was it memory embellished by centuries of retelling? A soft sound pulls you back. Somewhere deeper in the temple, a door closes. You are not alone here. You glimpse a figure at the far end of the chamber, robes shimmering faintly in lamplight, hair bound with gold thread. She raises her hand in silence, not to beckon, but to remind you, these walls keep their secrets. What happens here is for the goddess alone. You bow instinctively, lowering your eyes. When you look again, she is gone. The lamp flickers, the fruit glistens, the mat smells faintly of cedar oil. But the chamber tells you nothing more. Its truth remains layered like clay, each generation adding its own mark, each visitor leaving with questions unanswered. Archaeologists uncover small rooms within ziggurats, sometimes bare, sometimes filled with ritual objects, lamps, vessels, beads, figurines. None prove sexual rites. Yet absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, and the enduring legend of the sacred chamber continues to shape our imagination of Mesopotamian worship. You rise, reclaim your torch, and step back into the corridor. The air feels cooler now, as though the chamber exhaled once you left. Behind you the door closes with a sigh. Ahead the stairway descends toward the open night, where the city waits and the goddess still reigns. For now, the secret chambers keep their silence. The temple doors open, and with them the quiet vanishes. Outside, Uruk is alive in a way it never is on ordinary nights. The streets glow with oil lamps strung on poles, each flame reflected in polished bronze mirrors hanging from doorways. The air is thick with the smell of roasted lamb, honey cakes, and date wine. You step into the press of bodies, all moving toward the great plaza before the ziggurat. Drummers pound their instruments in layered rhythms, the sound echoing from clay walls and rattling your ribs. Women lift their arms to the sky, bracelets jangling. Men wear garlands of reeds around their necks. Children dart between legs, carrying figs and sweet bread, their laughter swallowed by the music. The festivals of Inanna, goddess of love, war, and fertility, were among the most elaborate in Mesopotamia. Texts describe days of processions, sacrifices, feasting, and performance. The New Year festival, in particular, included the sacred marriage rite, a symbolic union of king and priestess, reenacting the divine love between Inanna and Dumuzi. You are caught up in the flow, drawn toward the temple steps where a procession begins. Priests emerge first, their white linen robes stained with saffron. They swing bronze censers heavy with frankincense, sending clouds of perfume rolling over the crowd. Behind them come the priestesses, veiled in crimson, carrying baskets of fruit and jars of oil. And then, at the very center, the high priestess herself, her crown a tower of lapis lazuli and gold, her gaze fixed straight ahead as though she walks not among mortals but among gods. The crowd roars, but there is reverence in the roar, as if shouting could lift them closer to divinity. Cuneiform hymns describe how the city's women sang erotic songs during festivals, often weaving humor and sensuality into sacred performance. Some scholars suggest that these songs were accompanied by dances that blurred the line between ritual and theater, sacred devotion and communal pleasure. You are pressed against strangers, yet in this moment everyone feels bound together, as if the city itself is one great body, breathing in unison. Musicians raise their lyres, plucking strings that shimmer like light across water. A flute answers, sweet and piercing, carried high above the noise. The high priestess mounts the steps, and the procession enters the ziggurat. The doors close, but outside, the celebration does not stop. It grows. Men climb onto rooftops, shouting praises to Inanna. Women circle fires, throwing handfuls of grain into the flames. Couples disappear into alleyways, shadows merging in hurried embraces. For tonight, the boundary between sacred ritual and human longing blurs until no one can tell where one ends and the other begins. Ancient observers often conflated public festival chaos with temple practice. While it is unlikely that all citizens participated in ritual sex, the atmosphere of license during Inanna's festivals could easily give outsiders the impression of widespread sacred prostitution. You drift with the crowd toward a fountain fed by clay pipes. People splash water on their faces, laughing, wiping dust from their skin. A young woman presses a fig into your palm, sticky and sweet. An older man grabs your wrist, urging you to join in a circle dance, his eyes bright with drink. You move in rhythm, feet pounding earth, arms linked with strangers. The chant rises, Inanna, Inanna, Inanna. The goddess's name becomes heartbeat, breath, lifeblood. For a moment, you forget yourself, swept into a tide older and stronger than memory. Archaeological evidence of large open plazas in Mesopotamian cities suggests they were designed to hold vast gatherings. Ritual feasts, song, and communal dance were likely common. Whether these included sexual rites is still debated, but the festivals undeniably fused religion with civic identity, binding everyone under the goddess's gaze. At the edge of the plaza, torches flare as performers appear, acrobats, masked dancers, men in lion skins roaring and leaping through fire. Laughter mixes with awe. Children clap their hands, and women throw garlands at the dancers' feet. The night thickens, but the city does not sleep. Instead, it surrenders itself fully to joy, hunger, and ecstasy. Each act, whether eating, drinking, or loving, an offering to Inanna. You lean back against a wall, the fig sweetness still on your tongue, the drums still thrumming in your chest. The ziggurat looms above, its secret rites hidden within. But outside, the people of Uruk know their part. They live as the goddess commands, without shame, without restraint, at least for this one night. When dawn comes, the city will sober, markets will reopen, debts will be called. But tonight, under torchlight and star, Inanna's festival makes every soul a worshiper, every breath a hymn. The sun is already high when you stir. Your body aches from dancing, your throat still raw from shouting the goddess's name. The smell of smoke and wine lingers in your hair, and your reed mat feels harder than usual, pressing against your back like punishment. Outside, the city of Uruk is waking differently today, slower, heavier, like a great beast recovering from frenzy. You rise and step into the street. The air is thick, with yesterday's remains, overturned baskets, broken cups, garlands crushed into dust. Dogs nose through scraps of lamb fat, and children chase each other barefoot over the debris. Merchants begin to sweep their stalls, their faces grim, as if restoring order could erase the night's memory. But memory clings. You see it in the eyes of neighbors, some glowing with pride, others clouded with shame. For some, the festival was communion with the goddess. For others, it was excess, proof that piety had slipped into chaos. In Mesopotamian cities, festivals often blurred boundaries between sacred order and everyday life. While texts praise the joy of Inanna's rites, later scribes occasionally criticize their excess. The tension between devotion and discipline is a recurring theme in ancient records, just as it is in all societies. At the fountain, a woman whispers to another, her hand covering her mouth, as though Inanna herself might overhear. She says the king has fulfilled the sacred marriage in the temple, ensuring fertility for the land. Others mutter that he chose a woman unworthy, her beauty a mask for ambition. The sacred marriage rite, hieros gamos, is among the most debated rituals of Mesopotamia. Some scholars argue it was an actual sexual union between king and priestess, performed annually to secure divine favor. Others believe it was symbolic, enacted only through hymns and offerings. The uncertainty has fueled centuries of speculation about whether temple sex was sacred reality or metaphorical performance. You make your way toward the temple steps. The ground is littered with wilted flowers, jars of oil overturned and sticky in the dust. The great bronze doors are closed now, guarded by stern-faced priests who allow no entry. The mystery of what happened inside remains sealed, adding to the whispers outside. You pause at a vendor's stall. He sells flatbread, its crust blackened at the edges, sprinkled with sesame. As you chew, you hear two men debating whether the goddess truly walked among them last night. One swears he saw her in the high priestess's eyes, blazing with unnatural fire. The other scoffs, saying wine and darkness can make anyone into a goddess. Ancient hymns to Inanna describe her priestesses as vessels for divine presence. In some rituals, their voices were believed to carry the goddess herself, so that worshippers were not merely listening, but truly hearing the deity. This belief helps explain why priestesses were both revered and feared, bridges between mortal and divine. As the day lengthens, the city splits into two moods. Farmers load carts with tools, ready to return to fields. Scribes return to their tablets, calculating debts, writing contracts. Yet others linger in the plaza, drunk on memory, unwilling to let go of the ecstasy. They sing snatches of festival songs, though their voices crack and falter. You feel the tension, an invisible seam between sacred time and ordinary time. Yesterday, the goddess ruled. Today, kings and merchants reclaim their place. The shift feels abrupt, almost cruel. Yet without it, the city would unravel, its people lost in endless revelry. Anthropologists note that ritual excess often serves as a release valve in rigid societies. By allowing moments of inversion, when ordinary rules are suspended, festivals can strengthen social order in the long run. For Mesopotamia, where laws and contracts shaped daily life. Inanna's festivals may have been vital for maintaining balance between discipline and desire. At sunset, the ziggurat glows red against the sky. The priests emerge briefly, scattering grain into the air, a final gesture of thanks to Inanna. Then the doors close again, and silence settles. The festival is truly over. You return home. The reed mat feels softer tonight, the air calmer. Yet in your chest, something lingers, a faint echo of drums, a warmth that is not just from wine but from belonging, to the goddess, to the city, to a story older than memory. Outsiders, from Greek travelers to later biblical writers, misunderstood these rituals. They imagined temples filled with prostitutes, priestesses selling themselves for coin. But the truth was subtler: rites of fertility, performances of sacred love, and a city's way of weaving the divine into the fabric of daily survival. The myth of sacred prostitution likely arose from fragments of truth exaggerated by foreign eyes. As you drift towards sleep, you understand what those outsiders never could. Last night was not commerce, not shame. It was communion, messy and imperfect, but sacred all the same. You wake to the sound of foreign tongues in the marketplace. Not Sumerian, not Akkadian, but sharper accents. Traders from the West, men from the Levant, men from across the sea. They come for copper and wool, but they leave with more than goods. They carry stories, too, half heard, half remembered, told with the pride of those who do not fully understand. As you pass the stalls, you overhear one man speaking of the temple. His eyes gleam as he tells others that here in Uruk, women sell themselves in service of the goddess. His listeners laugh, slap their thighs, exchange glances of both shock and envy. The man swears he saw it himself, though you know the great bronze doors were closed, guarded all night. This is how the legend of sacred prostitution was born, not from careful record, but from gossip, observation without context. Later Greek writers like Herodotus would repeat these tales, claiming that every Babylonian woman must, at least once in her life, lie with a stranger in the temple of Ishtar. To the Greeks, the practice seemed exotic, decadent, even horrifying. To Mesopotamians, such descriptions would have been unrecognizable caricatures of their devotion. You feel a flicker of anger at these outsiders. They see only what they want to see: wine and dancing, women with painted eyes, priests in perfumed robes. They miss the hymns, the offerings, the fasting before the feast, the countless prayers whispered in shadow. They flatten mystery into scandal. But then you pause. You know how stories work. Once told, they travel faster than truth. A rumor is a spark in dry reeds. By the time truth arrives, the blaze has already reshaped the world. Clay tablets show that Mesopotamian women, especially priestesses, were under strict regulation. Their roles were tied to lineage, wealth, and sacred duty, not to promiscuity. Yet centuries later, biblical prophets condemned Babylon for whoredoms and idols, language steeped in the misunderstandings of foreign eyes. What was sacred at home became shameful abroad. You sit in the shade of a wall, watching the foreigners haggle. One points toward the ziggurat, his hand moving in obscene gestures. Another mimics the swaying dance of priestesses, twisting it into mockery. Their laughter is loud enough to carry. A boy nearby hears it and repeats the words, not knowing their weight. And so the echo begins. The temple stands unmoved, its bricks heavy with centuries of worship. Yet you sense how fragile meaning can be. A festival night, rich with symbol, becomes in another's mouth a tale of lust. A priestess, voice of the goddess, becomes in another's pen a prostitute. Modern scholarship has wrestled with these echoes. For much of the 19th and 20th centuries, historians repeated Herodotus uncritically, cementing the image of temple prostitution. Only in recent decades have cuneiform specialists carefully re-examined the texts, finding that what outsiders took for brothels were more likely storerooms, and that rites described in hymns were often symbolic poetry, not sexual commerce. The marketplace grows louder, and you pull your cloak tighter. You realize that the misunderstanding is not just foreign, it is also useful. To rulers abroad, painting Mesopotamia as corrupt justifies conquest. To preachers in distant lands, calling Babylon sinful reinforces their own holiness. In biblical tradition, Babylon became a symbol of ultimate corruption, the whore of Babylon, draped in scarlet, drunk on the blood of saints. Yet this was not the lived truth of temple women in Uruk or Babylon. It was myth layered upon myth, a shadow of a shadow. As you walk home, you think of Inanna. She is the goddess of paradox, love and war, fertility and destruction, beauty and terror. Could it be that the outsider's mistake was not entirely mistake, but the inevitable confusion of looking upon paradox without context? Perhaps to them, the goddess's embrace did look like promiscuity, her rituals like commerce. But you know better. You felt the heat of the drums, the hush of the sacred words. You saw women stand taller, not cheaper, within the temple walls. You know that sacredness and sexuality are not enemies, but intertwined threads, woven into the oldest cloth of human worship. Night falls, and the city glows faintly under the moon. Somewhere, in a tavern filled with traders, the story is being told again, louder, cruder, easier to sell. But in the silence of your mat, with the incense smoke still clinging to your hair, you whisper a hymn to Inanna. You do not fear the echo of misunderstanding because the truth remains, steady as the brickwork of the ziggurat devotion, sacrifice, song, and the unbroken bond between mortals and the goddess they serve. You wake one last time to the rustle of reed mats and the glow of dawn. The ziggurat rises in silence, its bricks the color of ancient sun. No drums beat today, no festival crowds press through the gates, only the steady murmur of river water and the voices of women sweeping the courtyards. Life is quieter now, but the memory of last night lingers like perfume in stone. As you sit by the temple wall, you wonder what will endure. Will future generations remember the hymns, the offerings, the fasting and devotion? Or will they remember only the rumors, the travelers, tales, the Greeks, exaggerations, the prophets, condemnations? For centuries, sacred prostitution was treated as unquestioned fact in textbooks, encyclopedias, and sermons. The myth was convenient, fitting into Western narratives about decadence, decline, and the corruption of the East. Only in the late 20th and early 21st centuries did scholars like Julia Asante, Stephanie Boudin, and others challenge it, dismantling the sacred prostitution theory piece by piece. They showed that the supposed evidence was thin, often mistranslated, or built on biased assumptions. Yet you realize something: stories have power, even when wrong. The women who served Inanna, whether priestesses, musicians, or lamentation singers, live on through these tales. Distorted, yes, but remembered. In their way, they became immortal. You trace your finger along a clay brick, feeling the marks of hands that placed it centuries before yours. Those hands belonged to laborers, women and men alike, who built not for scandal, but for eternity. Inanna's temples were among the first places where women held real institutional power. In Hedouana, daughter of Sargon of Akkad, became the first named author in world history. As high priestess, she composed hymns that celebrated the goddess and affirmed her own authority. Through her voice, we glimpse the strength of women in Mesopotamian religion, leaders, poets, and mediators between gods and mortals. The marketplace outside the temple still hums. Traders bargain, foreigners laugh, children chase each other through dusty alleys. Life goes on, indifferent to how history will one day be told. Yet in your heart you know the truth is not lost. It lives in tablets buried deep in the earth, in hymns carved in cuneiform, in rituals preserved across centuries of devotion. You close your eyes. You imagine Inanna herself, resplendent, crowned with horns of divinity, holding the staff and ring of power. She is not diminished by misunderstanding. She is vast enough to contain contradiction, radiant enough to shine even through the distortions of time. Modern scholarship now sees Mesopotamian temple women less as prostitutes and more as professionals, scribes, musicians, administrators, caretakers of land and ritual. Their presence in the temple economy was practical as well as spiritual. They were part of a system that sustained the earliest cities, linking agriculture, religion, and governance. Night will fall again soon, and another dawn after that. The goddess will be honored, no matter how strangers tell the story. The women of Inanna's house will sweep the courtyards, sing the laments, anoint the statues, and carry on their sacred duties. And you, here in the hush before the rising sun, realize that what they really did was far greater than rumor. They preserved the oldest rhythm of humanity, devotion, memory, and the weaving of life into something sacred. You lie back on your reed mat, the scent of incense still in your hair, and drift into sleep. The city murmurs, the river flows, and Inanna watches, her presence lingering in every brick, every song, every whispered prayer.